But for more on this, James Sweeney, a professor of international law at Lancaster University, joins us now. Thank you very much for joining us. So, 100 Russian diplomats expelled and all these countries coming together to punish Kremlin. What do you make of that?
Well, it's an extraordinarily cooperative, huge coalition now of states that are taking this action. Now, they are completely entitled to do so under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. You're entitled to expel a diplomat at any time without reason. But the scale of these particular expulsions is pretty grand. I mean, we are going back here to the levels of expulsions that would have been more commonplace in the Cold War.
And the joint statement by countries described this poisoning as an attack. Is that done purposely to have legal boundaries in the decisions taken now?
That's a very, very good question. It's absolutely the case that if this can be attributed to Russia, then Russia has in some sense impacted upon the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. The question is, to what extent? Article 2, paragraph 4 of the UN Charter asks states to refrain from the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity of another state. We call that the use of force. But in order for a country to have a right of self-defence, this is governed by Article 51 of the UN Charter, the state has to show that it's been the victim of an armed attack. Those are the two words that are used in the UN Charter. The joint statement was very careful about describing these events as an attack, but not an armed attack. One suspects that if they use the expression armed attack, it would escalate the situation, because it would appear as if the UK is claiming the right to respond with force.
And what could be done further? I mean, how far do you see this going?
Well, Russia has already responded by expelling UK diplomats. I'm sure it will respond by expelling diplomats from other countries too. The next stage would be to clamp down on foreign civil society organisations, NGOs, charities and what have you. And Russia doesn't have a terribly great record there in the first place. Of course, if it does so, being a member of the European Convention on Human Rights, people could complain to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg about their human rights in Russia being violated. But I think an even more serious question is not just whether human rights are going to be violated in Russia, but has an international crime taken place here in the UK? And if so, what sort?
And how do you see the UK-Russia relationship going further from now?
Well, we are pretty much at rock bottom. I can't see the UK claiming, I should say, the right of self-defence. That would be a very major and very unfortunate development. We could, of course, though, perhaps refer this situation to the International Criminal Court. Now, the reason why I say that is that it is possible that, given the number of Russians that have died under suspicious circumstances in the UK, including, of course, Alexander Litvinenko, and taking into account that apparently over 130 people in Salisbury have been exposed to this nerve agent, that it could constitute a widespread or systematic attack on the civilian population, which is a precondition for establishing that there have been crimes against humanity. Now, if Vladimir Putin himself had ordered this, the UK could not make him face justice in this country, because as a head of state he would have immunity. But interestingly, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court doesn't preserve head of state immunity. In fact, at the moment there is an arrest warrant for Omar al-Bashir of Sudan, the president of Sudan. Of course, again, for diplomatic reasons, I rather suspect that we won't be referring the situation to the International Criminal Court, and even if we did, we'd be very unlikely to see Mr. Putin standing on trial in The Hague, because there's no police force to help the International Criminal Court. It relies on its state parties cooperating. They are, at the moment, refusing to surrender Omar al-Bashir, as I mentioned a minute ago. I can't imagine any country being reckless enough to try and arrest Vladimir Putin. So on that basis, although I could build an argument in theory that crimes against humanity have taken place, it's unlikely to be prosecuted in practice.
Well, let's wait and see. Thank you very much for that, James Sweeney there.